Hello everyone, welcome back, and again we are going to the full Lorcana set. So next up is Emerald, green. Everyone moving in on green here, so let's get started here with Dr. Fauster's cards. We're all playing with cards these days. Well, 2-cost item, not inkable, so not immediately not hitting me off the right way. Pay 1 less for the next action you play, so very similar to the Amethyst card that reduces the cost of characters, but this one's for actions. I don't see many action-heavy decks being very good right now. There aren't just enough to kind of facilitate a game plan that'll actually win. You need characters, so a card that cheapens some of the cards that are less important to the overall game strategy, I'm not thrilled with. I'm going to give this a 2 just because I think that potentially down the road this will see some more play as we get more and more actions added to the game. Next up, though, we have Tinkerbell, most helpful. 4 costs, 2 lore, 2 strength, 3 willpower, evasive character. When you play it, you give something evasive. So really only good for challenging other evasive cards. 4 cost, 2, 3. Evasive, however, is a okay stat line. It's not the worst. I can see definitely decks where you want something middle of the road to kind of help gain lore and win the game with, but not having an impact on really what your opponent's doing as much, and it really only comes up when you're trying to kill an evasive unit on their side. So I'm gonna give this one 2, 2.5. Let's go with 2, 2.5. There, top in between. It's okay, not great, but yeah, I'd play it. Tamatoa, so 1/4, 1 lore. Not great, not bad. It's okay. It's middle of the road. It's kind of vanilla. 2 stars, you can play it. If there's a limited format, it'll be okay. Helps kind of take some things down, and anything you can do to buff its strength definitely will help there, since the willpower will keep it alive for more than one combat. Moving right along. Genie, Power Unleashed. So this is 8 cost or shift 6 evasive, so hard to challenge there. Whenever this character requests, you may play an action card with 5 cost or less for free. That's pretty strong. That is quite strong. Actually, I haven't fully read this card yet. So letting you play any kind of 5-cost action, which could be let it go, it could be the banish a unit and play there. It definitely has a home in some kind of decks there. I'd give this a pretty high rating. Much like the Elsa, it comes down, it can immediately quest, but when this character quests, you get to cast something else for free. Not quite as good as the Elsa, because Elsa kind of has its own spell built in. This one just lets you cast one for free, but it can vary based off what color you're pairing Emerald with there. So I'm giving this one 3, 3.5. It is powerful. The Genie support hasn't been as prominent as Elsa, I would say, but it is there, and this is only going to get better with time, as the spells that you can play that cost 5 exactly or 5 or less just get better and better, and it's a repeatable effect, and it's hard to kill. So yeah, leaning towards the 4, I would say 3.5, 4 is where we're at with this one, but definitely a strong card. Looking forward to getting this one down once I piece together all the pieces to go with it. Alright, Steal from the Rich, action. Whenever your character quests this turn, each opponent loses 1 lore, so it kind of gains life. 5 costs to kind of gain life is how I view losing lore for your opponent. Not thrilling. Works with Genie as a 5-cost action, I guess. I'm not that high on it. It is a pretty big drain, essentially. A life point swing. But it not being inkable leads me to believe it's going to be mostly filler. Maybe you play 1 or 2 copies of this and you have a deck with a lot of smaller units there that you kind of top off with Genie when you quest, and then you get to swing back there with the whole amount of stealing their lore. Really is what it does. Steal from the rich, steal their lore. Makes sense, but uninkable makes it hard to see it really work, but it'll definitely break some board stalls. So the Mad Hatter, Gracious Host, 2/4 with 3 lore on it. Whenever it's challenged, you may draw a card. So that's pretty good. If they don't one-shot it, you're drawing more than 1 card when it's challenged. And 3 lore for 5 is about as good as it gets as far as how much lore you can get. There's a couple that are more lore for less, but not as high stated as far as the willpower goes. But card's certainly fine. It'll certainly see play. A lot of increments of 3 is kind of odd to get to 20 on, but it definitely helps, and definitely every point will matter. Solid card. Wouldn't mind playing it in a lot of decks just as a way you play. You don't really care if it dies because you're at least drawing a card unless they kill it some other way, which them wasting a card instead of a resource in play, since it's not the greatest stat lined card anyway, makes it pretty good. If there was ways to interact when your opponent's challenging, on their turn in this game, which there aren't. You can't do anything on their turn so far. This would be way better, because imagine they challenge it, and then you can do something to make it so their card isn't challenging anymore. I believe you'd still draw. That's how the templating would work. But card solid, as is, and yeah, probably play in a couple decks. Mother Gothel, next here on the list. Now this card is, I think, archetype spawning. What I mean by that is, so 6 cost 3/6. It's a lot of cost for not the biggest stat line, questing 2, okay. But while this character is exerted, opposing characters cannot quest. That swing of making them have to challenge through makes it scary to play decks like princesses and stuff like that, because most of the princesses don't have much as far as strength goes, and a lot of decks will skimp out on playing interaction or removal just to have ways to win the game quickly. But if this thing gets down and is exerted, they can't do that. It is a very powerful effect, and pair this with bodyguards or other ways to control the board, whether it be rushing down earlier threats and then just using this as a way to close the game out there. Definitely getting a 4-star rating here. Mother Gothel, I think I could be overstating it, but the fact that it's a 6 cost and is inkable means that you can play 4 of these and build around it in a lot of ways, to where the yellow cards and the bodyguards that can protect this, as well as other colors that have bodyguards, really let you control the board. And I'm scary to think what it can mean as far as how well this card will just win the game by itself. But yeah, 4 stars. Sudden Chill. All right, Song. So being a song has some inherent value all the way already, with cards that trigger off of casting songs or otherwise, but each opponent discards a card. Now, spending a whole card to make them discard doesn't sound great, but if you have a lot of discard, it could start to add up, especially since the fact that this discard is also inkable. If it wasn't inkable, I would never touch this card. But inkable means that there's definitely situations where your opponent gets down to 1 card. Having cards like this, which you didn't really plan on playing, but that your opponent has to kind of play around the whole game, really gives this card a push there, much like the Amber card that discards 2. The fact that they exist and that you can have some number of them in your deck just to have, and hey, if they come up, great. If they don't come up, then whatever, you just ink them, then yeah, these cards can definitely come up. I'm going to give this 2.5, but I could be very wrong, and the fact that having these in your deck and playing them always means that it's a consistent thing your opponent has to play around. And in decks that are not steel, with access to some draw 7 effects, hitting their resources at certain points of the game can be completely game breaking. So certainly expect to see this card. Next up, we have Horus, and to a lesser extent Jasper next. Horus, pretty vanilla, 4/3, good at challenging. Not thrilled. I would say this is about 2 stars. Wouldn't want to put it in my constructed deck, but I could see there being some other benefits to doing so later on, but not really where I'm at. 2, 1.5, 2. On the other hand, though, Jasper, common crook. When this is questing, they choose an opposing character. It can't quest. Another kind of prohibiting of the quest mechanic from your opponent is really something that green capitalizes on. Really helps to control the board, and a lot of those effects are really powerful against certain decks. Some of them won't have as much effect. A lot of the Ruby decks, I think, just have enough strength inherently in their cards to where they won't really care. But some of, again, the Princess decks, the Amber/Sapphire decks, don't have as much strength as some of the other things, and a card like this can certainly lock them out. Solid card, 3 stars. I can definitely see this being played pretty widespread, just overall as a card that throws them off tempo or off their game and forces interaction where they don't want to interact. But yeah, I'm on top of it. All right, John Silver, Alien Pirate. When you play this character, and whenever it quests, the chosen character gains a Reckless, so they can't quest and must challenge. This card is very solid. Again, in the vein of making it so that they don't want to, or that they can't quest on their turn. Emerald is doing something else here where it can actually just force your opponent to attack into them, giving something Reckless, which, if you're playing any kind of bodyguards out of different colors there, or even just this card, just say this is your only exhausted character, they have to attack into this 5/5, which is huge. So not only did you gain a bunch of lore from questing with it, and when you play it, they also might just say you have nothing exerted, they just can't do anything. They just are Reckless, they can't quest, they can't challenge, so it just locks them out for a full turn. So these kind of effects are super powerful. This one's definitely getting 4 stars. It's up there with being one of the best, I think, late game cards that we've seen so far, mainly because it's inkable. Uninkable, this card loses a little bit of value, but it's definitely a 5/5 lore 2, and it forces things to attack into things they don't want to attack into, and stalls the game out to where you can really pull ahead. But next up we have Genie, 2 cost 2/3 vanilla stat line. The fact that it shifts into the bigger one means it will be played. Fine role player, 2.5 star, I'd say. Nothing exciting, but you'll play index if you want to shift into the bigger Genie. Really all you have to say about this one. All right, getting to some of my favorite Emerald cards, all right here. Cusco. So Ward can't be chosen except to challenge. That is super relevant because when it's challenged and banished, you may banish the challenging character. So if they kill it, whatever they killed, you get to kill it back. Questing for 4 is huge, or 3 is huge, and also being able to just continuously do that, and they can't use anything but a unit to ascend into it is pretty huge. And again, this thing with Bodyguard means that anything protecting it has to get dealt with first, and they can't use any kind of action to get rid of this thing first. It's very strong, quests for a lot, and it'll always trade with something that your opponent probably doesn't want to. So 3 stars. Only thing holding it back from me from being a 4 is uninkable, but it's a very good card. So I think this is also along with Simba, the Bodyguard 2-drop 2/3. I think this is one of the best cards that people are not talking about. I think it's because it's hard to evaluate early on how cards work, especially in new games. But there's a card in Hearthstone called Abusive Sergeant. It's a 1 cost 2/1 that does the same thing. Similarly, it gives something +2 willpower or +2 strength until end of turn. But in this game, letting your 1 mana 2/2s trade into 4 cost cards while just being a something that accumulates lore or as a resource is huge. This is, I believe, one of the best 2-drops that we've seen in the game, and I've been putting in every single Emerald deck I've had, regardless of other synergies going on, just because it lets the trades that you want to have happen. And when it comes to killing like a card like Moana or Elsa, being able to give it +2 strength from hand while not being down a full card, like you'll see some other cards that buff strength are. This is just its own card by itself. So definitely a card I've included in all the decks there. And I'm giving this 3.5, 4 stars. It's not quite a 4 because it's not a very powerful effect, but it's a super important role player that I think we'll see in every Emerald deck once the kind of metagame gets established there and people kind of figure things out. This will be a 4 of in every Emerald deck. Next up, we have Flynn Rider. So whenever it becomes challenged, the challenging player chooses and discards. So going back to the discard theme with the Amethyst discard 2 and the 2 cost discard 1, this one is very strong. Not only does it make them discard a card, it may trade with whatever they're attacking it with it into if it doesn't have enough willpower left. Additionally, it quests for 2 lore, which is it's a big amount. 2 is kind of where like, okay, I have to pay attention to this card. 1, not so much. 2, yes, I definitely do. 3, holy heck, do I have to pay attention to it, is how the kind of lore breakdown works for me. But it'll always trade with a card. It may trade it for 2 cards, and if it's unchecked, it kind of runs away with the game a little bit. So this card, solid 3, 3.5. Again, not the most powerful effect to earn a 4, but definitely one of the better cards. Again, has made it into pretty much every Emerald deck I put together. These 2 cards here, Megara and Flynn, are among the best ones I think Emerald has access to and a reason to play Emerald. Moving along here, Stolen Scimitar. So tap, the character gets +1 strength. If it's Aladdin, it gets +2. It's okay. Helps you trade up a lot. Pairs pretty well with Amethyst, I would say, because a lot of their things are Challenger or Rush Challenger. Giving something more strength without losing a card is always important, but I'm not super thrilled with it. I could see it being played. I'm not, again, sold on it. 2 stars for now. Yeah, it's okay. Even with Aladdin, it's still okay. The next up I'm going to kind of evaluate as a pair because they're pretty interesting together. First we'll go with Mickey Mouse Artful Rogue, shift 5, so whenever you play an action, chosen character can't quest. So more into the theme of locking your opponent out from questing is Emerald's thing. These are both uninkable, and the reason why I do it again is important is because if you have 2 of them, a game state which you can craft is essentially a Mickey, 2 do-it-agains, and an evasive character, not really Mickey, because otherwise they could just challenge Mickey to stop them from challenging. But you can kind of use that loop, returning each other, do it again, to another do it again, over and over again, to where they just can't really do anything, and you get to quest with your evasive card, making, a lockout piece there, I would say, is more of the Green's theme or Emerald's theme is just locking your opponent out from doing things. And this does it pretty well. I'm not super thrilled by it at 7 cost with Uninkable, especially with this. I don't really like it because to make this kind of loop happen, you need both. You need 2 at least. And having a bunch of this card, but you can't ink early, and if you draw a bunch and you don't have any actions either to return, it doesn't do anything. This card I'm much less high on. I'm okay with Mickey, but I think together they're a pair. I give it a solid 3. Only reason I don't do it higher is mainly because of this card being uninkable. Do it again rather than Mickey. Mickey, I could see being something to build towards and play and build around, but do it again not having the ability to ink is pretty big strike against it. But yeah, solid 3. If it gets going, it's hard to beat and you need to interact with it, but it's okay. All right, next up we have Mother Knows Best. So uninkable song, return chosen character to the player's hand. Very strong. Kind of back to Befuddle, I think. The Amethyst, return a card that costs 2 or less to the owner's hand. This card's a little bit different. It can't be inked, but you really have to think about, I think, the return to hand effects less like Magic's Unsummon and more like Hearthstone's Sap. Sap was a 2 cost to return something to their hand, and this one can be played for free with being a song. But the ability to gain that much tempo back and to lock things out of kind of your overall game plan, huge boost. This card is very solid. 3.5. Just it does a lot more than you'd expect for being a card disadvantage card by returning to hand and not actually impacting it. A lot of tempo can be gained by cards like this, especially since it can be sung. Once the 1 mana 2/2 part of the game is over, the early turns of the game, and you're onto the more mid-range cards, being able to play your 3-drop, then play a 3-drop, you sing this out for free, return their card, and play a 4, like something we'll get to in a minute, really strong to put you really far ahead. Yeah, big fan. Speaking of big fans, it's kind of the opposite. These next 2 cards actually I'm kind of the inverse on. Action, Vicious Betrayal gets +2, and if it's a villain, gets +3. I think Megara is just a better version of this card. It doesn't need to be an action. You could have this, the defense being this is an action for do it again, but not really anything I want to play with. I don't think you have room for many effects like this in your deck, and Megara is just a better version of it. And Stampede, being a situational removal spell that is uninkable, is pretty poor. It's like doubly situational, as in it can only do 2 damage, so it doesn't kill anything. It has more than 2 strength or health left, willpower left, and also they have to already be damaged. I'm not a fan of either of these cards. I'll give them some merit because they're playable 2 stars, but I'm not. I'm going to say that they might see play, but I'm not going to be the one putting them in my decks. I'm going to pass on them. There's better versions of cards like that right now, and better effects to get those. Better cards to get those effects. So going back to really quick here, Mother Knows Best, and bringing up Hans. Hans was one of the cards we saw, the first cards we saw with 3 lore, and it was as cheap as it was. They were all higher cost. I think this is the cheapest 3 lore in the game. Really gives you an ability to take over and kind of get ahead of the game. 3 lore is a lot, and the tempo weapons that this color has, and the ability to control the board and control who can attack where, and the number of 3 lore cards that they do have really gets out of hand quickly, and it's inkable even. I mean, that's really a hard still not to have. I'm giving this 3.5 to 4, 3.5 in that range there. It'll see a lot of play. It's a card that has to be answered. It's only not getting a higher ranking because it doesn't mesh well against some of the 5s and 6s that people can ramp into in some ways, but it is a strong card, and I expect it to see a lot of play. Duke of Weaselton, we've seen these before, 3 stars. They'll see play in most every deck as ways to check other copies of themselves in other colors. Pretty boring at that point, but Never Landing, Peter Pan. Yeah, it's an evasive card. We talked about the evasive kind of Mickey Mouse do it again loop, having an evasive card to do that. This doesn't quest for nearly enough for me to want to do it. It's almost like this card at one point had 2 lore, and then they just changed it because it was too good, and then they just never revisit it. I'm giving it a 2 because it's a cheaper evasive card, but it's not really good at it. It's okay. I'm not looking to play with it, but who knows? If we get a bigger Peter Pan in a later set that can shift off of it, it'll be played more so, but I'm going to pass for now. All right, moving on to some of the better cards I think here for this color. There's quite a few Emerald, and at first when I was looking at Emerald, I was super disappointed because of how few cards we had at the time when I first looked, and there wasn't enough support for them, but we got some support. So let's look at these ones. These are all what I would consider bangers. So the first two are uninkable. That is a big strike against them. Not, otherwise they'd probably be some of the best cards in the game. They'd be getting the 4.5, 5-star rating almost. So Rush can be attack immediately, 5 cost 4/4, lures for 2, quest for 2. When you play this, exert all opposing damage characters. So it really lets you, let's say, your opponent challenged one of your creatures down, or one of your characters down, and you have like one of your 1-mana 2/2s up, and then they didn't want to quest because they want to set up for something else later. Tapping everything and being able to essentially hit anything that's already a little bit damaged. Huge amount of tempo can be gained by being able to finish off things or take down something really big that has some points of damage on it already. Again, kind of odd that the Stampede card damages anything that's already damaged, and this thing, I guess, also cares about already being damaged, but no way to initially damage them is really in this color except by giving Reckless, which, it's okay. But yeah, this one, solid 3. Again, things holding back from being higher rankings is the uninkable part of it. Very similar to Genie. When I first saw Genie, I didn't understand the difference between inkable and uninkable, so I thought this card was just a slam dunk 4 of in every deck that was playing Emerald because it was insane. Back to the 3-cost return a creature to its hand, or return a character to its hand effect. This is a similar effect, make return to their hand, but also a 3/4 evasive unit there. Very strong stat line to get that huge tempo swing. They play their 6, you play your 6, return this to your hand, now you're ahead by a lot. Huge tempo swing there. Definitely a strong card. This is getting 3.5 stars. Again, only not higher because of uninkable. But very, very happy to see these cards exist and looking forward to playing with them. Iago, you got a problem. Your chosen character gains Reckless, so they can't quest, it must challenge. Very, very good role player. I'm giving this a solid 3.5. It'll hammer some decks to the ground because they just won't be able to gain the tempo that they want. Specifically Moana, which I think is going to be a big a draw a lot of people have is to Moana early on in the game. But this card shuts down a lot of strategies and demands answers, and with 4 willpower, it's going to be hard to take down a lot of decks. Solid card. Definitely goes into a lot of Emerald decks as ways to just kind of get through, and pairs pretty nicely with Megara because it has a lot of willpower there. So let's say you exert this to tap something down or make them attack, and then next turn you get to hit back with this plus a Megara if they couldn't kill this on the crackback. So strong cards. Let's go up here next. So the Beast is Mine. Chosen character gains a Reckless. While I do like this effect as like a tap effect, I don't really like it as a spell or an action, I should say. It's a whole card just to make it Reckless there and doesn't do any damage or crack back in any way. I'm not thrilled. It could be okay, but I'm not seeing the Beast is Mine being much of anything here. Mickey Mouse, much like a lot of the vanilla cards, its saving grace is that you can shift onto it, so it'll see play, but just a role player, not anything you're looking forward to playing here. Yeah. So the Cheshire Cat, not all there. So when this character is challenged and banished, banish the challenging character. So it'll always trade. Whatever they attack with, it'll always trade. Now it can trade down, meaning that it will trade with something that costs less than it, which is not good. But in a lot of instances there, you'll be able to trade other resources for smaller characters to make it so that they've traded something big they don't really want to trade into this, because it gaining 2 lore a turn starting on turn 3, very strong. Being inkable as well, huge plus for it. 3.5 for me. Also one of my favorite characters in all of Disney, Cheshire Cat. Just a super good way to race and also never put you down on cards because it'll always trade with something. All right, next up here, Lady Tremaine. When you play this character, return an action from your discard to your hand. Uninkable 1/5. Yeah, this is the kind of card where if it was inkable, I would see playing it, but uninkable, I don't really want to touch it. I'm giving this a 2 to like a 1.5. It's just, it doesn't do much while it's down, and you might as well just play another action that you really wanted to. And that's just something that like loops with it, where I'm not seeing, but I haven't seen anything. I don't believe that works really well with it. It's okay. It'll redraw you a card, but there are better ways to do that in the game. Next up, Aladdin, Prince Ali, Ward, so it can't be targeted by Fire the Cannons, which we'll get to eventually, but huge part of this card is it's a 2-mana 2/2, not a 1-mana 2/2, but some of the cards that this can shift onto this is hugely relevant. It itself isn't really much more than a 2-3 star card, but what it enables makes it much more playable than it otherwise would be. So yeah, 2.5, 3 stars, whichever. So Cruella de Vil, when this character is challenged and banished, you may return chosen character to the player's hand. So I didn't read this correctly the first time when I read it, or how it worked, or I didn't understand how it worked. So when it's killed by a challenge, you get to return anything to the hand, not just what banished it. So it can be used in a lot of different ways. So it's almost one of the last things that your opponent has to banish. Otherwise, if it's banished by them challenging it, you can maybe return one of your own cards that you don't want them to challenge later and then kill. You get to replay, or it can just use it as a tempo weapon to like bounce back whatever they're having and kind of buy some time. Card is definitely fine. I'm not thrilled by it, but it's a good effect, and it'll definitely buy time against the decks where you need that kind of time to get things going. And questing, obviously, for 1, not the greatest, but a 1/3, it's okay. It'll pick off some things and help with some of the damage triggers that the Emerald has there. Yeah, card's fine. And last up we have Jumba. So vanilla stats, 4/5 for 5, quests for 2. It's okay. I'm not playing this over a lot of the other 5s that we have, but cool card. Glad he has his own thing. But yeah, that's it for Emerald, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Let's move on in the next video where we go over Ruby.